In this segment, I'll be talking about creative synthesis of ideas. Now you see, many a times we get that mental block. To be more specific, we get that creativity block. We get blocked in terms of the creative juices and ideas that flow. Sometimes it comes to us, sometimes it does not. But do you realize that most of the time when we really want it to flow, it just does not flow and remains stagnant? How do you go about preparing and priming yourself to be able to go to that creative mode at the snap of your fingers? In fact, there's a lot of preparatory work that is important. Many people expect that on a day before a major assignment, my creative juices can flow just like that. But in order for it to work, you must have a well-oiled machine. I call it a creative machine that is done with the setup, done with the maintenance done on a regular basis. So how do you go about getting yourself more creative? But before I share with you that, let me share with you a story that I've recently heard from a very wise man. Now this wise man, some of you may know who he is. I'll let you guess who he is once I've finished the story. The story goes like this. This wise man was once asked to go to a conference. It was a conference involving a lot of intellectuals, a lot of academics, academic intellectuals, a lot of individuals who are very smart and at the front line of creative breakthroughs. So what he did was, he actually went on stage without a PowerPoint. In fact, this bottle of water was his PowerPoint, and he asked the audience members, full of these intellectuals, and asked the audience members, what is it that I have in my hand? And the audience members, they were like, oh, come on, this is so easy. It's a bottle of water. And then he said, come on, give me some more. What else? He said, oh, it's a bottle of water with a white cap on. He said, come on, give me some more. Oh, it's a bottle of water with a white label on. Come on, give me some more. Oh, it's a Perry Ocean. That's the brand of the water. Come on, give me some more. It's a water bottle that's filled with mineral water. Okay, come on, give me some more. Oh, it's a clean, pristine water. Yes, give me some more. Oh, it's a water bottle, the container with some lines and some curves, some designs, some patterns on it. And this went on for 5 to 10 minutes. Until the audience members, they started to get it. They then realized that it is when we start exhausting our adjectives to describe something, when we start exhausting descriptors to describe something, that is where we are at the edge, at the threshold point of making a creative breakthrough. It is at that point in time that when the audience members then started thinking, instead of circumscribing ourselves to that one particular dimension, thinking that it's just a water bottle, it is when they ran out of adjectives to describe what it is based on what they see, then the mind starts to move into its creative mode. And audience members started throwing up very creative interpretation of what is in the hand of this wise man. A paperweight, one said. A paperweight where, for example, you have pieces of paper, strong wind, you can place this down, hold the pieces of paper in place and use it as a paperweight. Another then opine and say that, well, this could be a rolling pin. It's strong enough, sturdy enough, it will maintain the structural integrity of the bottle can be maintained because there's water in there. And another person said and contributed, oh, this can also be used as a magnifying glass because you can magnify words if you hold it at a certain distance. So you see, this is where we then kick in the creative thinking process. When we start to exhaust what we think we know already, we start to exhaust what we can associate things to that particular object, we then change a mode. My key question to you is this. How do you then bring about that kind of creative process as often, as quickly as possible to change to that state? And that is where you need to train your brain to get to that within a short period of time. How do you train? Here are 3 simple steps that you can take home, that you can execute right away. Ready? Alright, so let's get started. Step number 1 is where you have to turn to your archives, or I would call it your bank. Now, I'm not talking about a bank where you deposit money. I'm talking about your humor bank. I'm talking about your story bank. I'm talking about your quotation or your phrases bank. You call it a word bank. These are the banks that you should take a look at, pull it out, and step 2, once you identify your bank, step number 2 is allocate a time every week. Could be every week, could be every 2 weeks, could be every month. But allocate a time, a fixed time, and tell yourself for the next 1 to 2 hours, what I'm going to do is, for example, if I go into my story bank for this particular story, this story message, for the 1 to 2 hours, I'm going to draw as many associations as I can. I'm going to throw out all the adjectives, all the words, all the phrases that I can associate it with that story message. And after that, when it seemed that I have already exhausted it, the point of exhaustion, it is where I then continue with it and start to draw associations that might not be directly relevant. Okay? Even things that might not be directly relevant. So you have to be in a state where you suspend judgment first. Now, how best can you do this step number 2? You can do this with a friend. You can do this with a colleague, with someone else to help to contribute and to exhaust those adjectival phrases or words. Then you let it sleep. Don't have to start pulling your hair out because you can't think of certain phrases. Then you just let it sleep. After which, you can then come back the next day and start to draw associations with those that are irrelevant, that seem to be irrelevant, and try and find relevance out of irrelevance. I repeat, try and find relevance out of irrelevance. And that is the exercise, the activity that you give your brain to think out of the box. That's the kind of activity that you give your mind the ability to become even stronger, even better. So, let me give you an example to illustrate the steps. For example, the story message for the one that I used at the World Championship of Public Speaking was outsmart, outlast, right? It was a story, a message with stories talking about dealing with bullies. So originally when I had the key word here, bullies, throwing out all the phrases, you can start thinking about humiliation, being humiliated. What else? What are some of the adjectival phrases that you can throw about bullies? You can talk about being scolded, right? You can talk about being sad. You can talk about injury. You can talk about low self-esteem, right? So on and so forth. Then, when I've exhausted that, I decided to push a bit further and to maybe even come up with things that might not be directly relevant. Remember that step? So I came up with things like external, things like internal, yeah, and things like fight. Even though this now that I see it, it's quite intuitive, but I missed it out here. So don't judge it. Just let it flow. Yeah, flight, so on and so forth. And then what happened was when I slept over it, the next day I tried drawing associations between external and internal. Might not seem very intuitive at first, but then I realized that, hey, bullies can come in 2 different categories. I drew the relevance an external bully as someone else. Someone else who bullies me. And an internal bully is where I talk about the self. I bullying myself. And that was how I actually created my award-winning story. And that was how I was crowned the World Championship of Public Speaking in the year 2016. So these are some simple ways in which you can help to kickstart, well-oil, well-lubricate the creative mechanism in the machine up here. And take note, it needs to be a consistent process. So let's be consistent and let's do it for at least several months to come.